You want the girl every single time she walks out onto the court? What are we supposed to do? You want them all to give Caitlin their firstborn? Like, what are you looking for?
She's just not built for the physicality of this league.
Yeah,
and she's not quick enough to get away from the physicality.
You know, you look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to come with some grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time.
Caitlin Clark is the talk of the town. She is the golden girl that is transforming women's basketball and drawing legions of new fans to the arenas. Perhaps expectedly, her insane popularity rubbed some people the wrong way, and there is no shortage of haters looking to pour some cold water on her shiniest accomplishments. An assortment of WNBA players, media personalities, and basketball experts has gone on the record doubting Clark or explaining her meteoric rise as being due to non-basketball factors. Let's take a closer look at all the criticism Clark had to endure over the past couple of years and try to determine how much of it is indeed valid and how much is just pure nonsense. Probably the most surprising is the amount of ill will towards Caitlin Clark among the veteran WNBA players, or at least some of them. The prevailing attitude seems to be that Clark has to earn her respect on the court, just like any other novice, and her college accomplishments and media hype might have done her a disservice. That was especially the case early in the season, before Clark found her footing and started to post impressive stat lines on a regular basis. Coming into the league, she was considered to be a bit spoiled and too soft, and some of the ultra-competitive women ballers were eager to send a message that nothing will be given on reputation. The hate hasn't been completely verbal either. Many defenders have a tendency to foul Clark very hard, either to stop her offensive avalanches or just to make a point. Some of these fouls came in the flow of the game, but there were cases where someone just whacked Clark with no good reason at all. Probably the most infamous foul on Clark was committed by the Chicago Sky guard, Chennedy Carter, who simply clobbered the rookie and sent her to the floor while they were waiting for the ball to be inbounded. After a media storm erupted following the game, Carter was repeatedly asked to provide an explanation for her actions. She mostly remained unrepentant and defiant, justifying the foul with competitiveness.
I'm going to compete no matter who you are and no matter who's in front of me. So that's just what it was. Heat of the moment play, we're getting at it, we're going back and forth. It's basketball, it's all hoops. After we finish the game, it's all love. I don't have any regrets with anything.
At least Chennedy has been respectful in her comments, which is befitting of her tough defender status. She clearly knows that Caitlin Clark is already a great player in the league and doesn't really have a reason to go to war of words with her. However, more accomplished rivals such as two-time WNBA MVP A'ja Wilson can afford to be more directly critical of Caitlin Clark and get away with it. A'ja didn't sound particularly spiteful, but she made it clear that she will stop short of crowning Clark as the greatest college player ever due to a lack of championship trophies.
Ooh, that's tough because you got to win one. I feel like that college is one of those spaces where you got to win one for them to even have your name in the conversation. And it took me 3 years to win mine, so it's hard. But congratulations to her.
Now, that doesn't sound particularly harsh, and there is some logic behind the argument. On the other hand, Caitlin Clark has an extensive history of success in the NCAA tournament, and she led Iowa to 2 consecutive national championship games, only to lose both times in a heartbreaking fashion. You can judge for yourself how much jealousy there is in Wilson's dismissal of Clark's legendary status, but at least she can back her words when the 2 superstars potentially meet in the WNBA playoffs. Active WNBA players are not the only ones that are constantly being asked tricky questions about Caitlin Clark. Former players are frequently debating her merits and feeding into the media frenzy, especially when they say something negative. Since they have less to lose by hating, retired players sometimes try to deny Clark even those accomplishments that she clearly and objectively attained. Former holder of the informal NCAA scoring record for women, Lynette Woodard let her tongue loose when commenting on Caitlin Clark, scoring more points in college than her.
My record was hidden from everyone for 43 years. I don't think, I'll just go ahead and get the elephant out of the room. I don't think my record has been broken because you can't duplicate what you're not duplicating. So unless you come with a men's basketball and a 2-point shot.
Compare that to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who congratulated LeBron immediately after he broke his NBA scoring record. For some reason, it seems harder for older stars to accept Caitlin Clark as a legitimate force in women's basketball, so they construct ridiculous charges to somehow relativize even her statistics. Woodard didn't have a real reason to sound this bitter, and she showed bad form towards a fellow basketball player. People who are paying Caitlin Clark are also known to relativize things when it suits their interests. A lot has been made of the fact that Clark's base salary for this year is in 5 figures, which is shocking after she had one of the richest NIL deals in in college that easily had 6 zeros. It's pretty much a consensus that Clark is currently grossly underpaid as one of the faces of the league, but WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert doesn't seem to agree.
Caitlin has the ability to make up to $500,000 just in WNBA wages this year. So, of course, they're just looking at a base which is collectively bargained. And actually, it's low because she's the #1 pick. She'll make a little more than that. But she also has millions and millions of dollars of endorsements.
One would think that the money Clark makes from endorsements is not something she owes the league, and that the benefits reaped by WNBA by Clark's decision to turn pro are worth much more. Of course, the boss has to reinforce the company line in a public interview, but from her answer, it appears that Engelbert really doesn't understand what all the fuss is about. To be fair, WNBA is doing a solid job promoting Caitlin Clark's stardom, but the financial benefits have mostly been directed towards the league, rather than the player who is responsible for the sudden spike in revenues. Other voices in the media acknowledge that Clark is at the center of the league's newfound resurgence, but even then, there are some head-scratching moments. One of the best examples of such behavior happened on The Pat McAfee Show, a wildly popular sports talk program hosted by the former NFL kicker who thrills his audience with a direct, no-filter approach. However, Pat McAfee certainly crossed a line when he was discussing Clark's stature within the current rookie class.
What the WNBA currently has is what we like to describe as a cash cow. There is a superstar. And we're not saying that the players on the court need to act any differently. That's the athletes are going to do what athletes are going to do in any sport. And I think we're all learning that WNBA, that's old school football, baby. That is old school football. But I would like the media people that continue to say, this rookie class, this rookie class, this rookie class. Nah, just call it for what it is. There's one white bitch for the Indiana team who is a superstar.
From the context, it really appears he wanted to set Clark apart from the rest of the class, but calling her names and including a racial epithet is really tasteless. The fact that McAfee is white just like Clark doesn't really change a thing. He should be aware that he is speaking to a huge audience and that his words will be placed under a microscope. His insensitive remarks are especially troubling in the light of the earlier attempts by the national media to frame the narrative around Clark's ascent to the pantheon of her sport in terms of racial rivalry between black and white players. If we are looking for a personification of Caitlin's arch-rival within this storyline, it would most certainly be her nemesis from the college days that is also a serious contender for this year's Rookie of the Year award. Angel Reese, explosive 6'3" forward who previously played for LSU and now suits up for the Chicago Sky, is frequently portrayed as an equal to Clark. She was the one to beat her in the 2023 NCAA Tournament Finals, and she never backed away from the challenge of being perceived as the antithesis of Caitlin Clark. To complicate the matters even more, Reese is black and plays a vastly different style of basketball, and judging by her recent comments, she is not lacking for swagger.
And just looking at that, like, I'll take that role. I'll take the bad guy role, and I'll continue to take that on and be that for my teammates. And if I want to be that, and I know I'll go down in history, I'll look back in 20 years and be like, yeah, the reason why we watching women's basketball is not just because of one person. It's because of me, too, and I want y'all to realize that.
While she never explicitly mentioned Caitlin, it's very clear who that one person that Reese was referring to really is. Their basketball battles have continued in the WNBA, where both rookies are piling up big numbers. Two emerging stars performed amazingly in their head-to-head matchups, with all 3 games between Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever this year being very dramatic and fought to the last minute. However, one of these meetings also featured a flagrant foul on Clark committed by Reese that included a direct hit to the head. Online commentators have seized the opportunity to debate which of the stellar rookies has the upper hand in this budding rivalry. While most of the conversation has been reasonable, there are instances when the opinions have been obviously partial. A great example of this color-based approach was provided by the retired WNBA legend Cheryl Swoops, who is black. Swoops is open about supporting Reese and went as far as to rationalize the hard foul as a normal basketball play.
It's the clip they want to post because they're going to get all these likes and reposts, but that's a basketball play. Mm-hmm. She hit her in the head, so of course it should be upgraded to a flagrant one. Refs looked at it, they upgraded it. Can we keep playing basketball? My thing is, like, every time Caitlin gets fouled, we can't make it seem like she was assaulted.
Such rhetoric ignores the fact that somehow it's always Caitlin who is ending up on the floor in rough encounters, like the ones with Chennedy Carter or Angel Reese. This is sometimes explained as a byproduct of her physical build and a lack of toughness. However, It's possible to view these arguments as thinly veiled racial stereotypes, taking us back to the old black versus white trope that used to be very prominent in men's basketball a few decades ago and still rears its head from time to time. As far as commenting on the impact of racial identity on American sports, there are no more widely respected authorities than ESPN's talking head Stephen A. Smith. Despite his penchant for bombastic quotes delivered in his typical, highly animated manner, Smith was pretty even-keeled when providing his opinion about the contrast in styles between Clark and Reese. Here is his take on this complicated and contentious issue.
So you could say it's race. I don't think that that's what it's all about, but race always plays a role in something like this to some degree. It's not completely out of the equation. It's always that because America is America.
While he never said that Clark being white is the primary reason for favorable portrayal in the media that she is mostly getting, Stephen A. reminds us that the question of race might be in the back of everyone's mind. He definitely respects Caitlin and wants her to succeed, but for some people, even mentioning race when talking about basketball players raises an alarm. After all, the United States has a long history of racial strife, and sports have frequently provided a proxy battlefield for projecting certain views that have little to do with athletic skill and winning mentality. It would certainly be better if the debate stayed within the confines of polite treatment, but that's unfortunately not always the case. The lack of respect for Clark isn't coming only from the African American community, as some of the most dismissive remarks about her were uttered by Caucasians. Again, active WNBA players are leading the charge in this department. Just look at the answer by the veteran point guard and bona fide female basketball legend Diana Taurasi when asked about the incoming rookie class by TV anchor Scott Van Pelt.
Reality is coming.
Okay.
There's levels to this thing, and that's just life. We all went through it.
Of course.
And you see it on the NBA side, and you're going to see it on this side, where you look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to come with some grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time.
As much as Diana deserves the benefit of a doubt because she definitely understands basketball, it's hard not to be disturbed by the patronizing tone of this quote. After 4 years of otherworldly play in college, it's a bit unfair to question Clark's readiness for the big stage. Still, it's understandable that WNBA players want to protect their turf and keep their elite status for as long as they can. Would we really be happier if the old guard just moved away and let Clark take over with no resistance? This sentiment was summed up very well by some media personalities who are looking to balance the picture. A few of them aren't afraid to go against the grain and defend active and former players who are doubting Caitlin Clark, despite the risk of alienating a majority of the audience. ESPN anchor L Duncan provided a fiery defense of WNBA veterans, although her passionate approach and curious choice of words might have been a bit over the top.
Who are these girls? Who are these girls that are hating on Caitlin Clark? Are you just combing through Twitter? What else are these women supposed to do? Fawn over her? Fangirl over her? Bend the knee? Kiss the ring? Like, what do you want from them?
Again, this rant can be interpreted in different ways depending on where you stand in the Caitlin Clark debate. For some, it's a great example of the hysteria surrounding a great player that has never publicly disrespected her foes or demanded special treatment. Others might argue that the comments fail to take into account the unique impact Clark is having on women's basketball and that she should be given more credit from players and pundits alike. Other commentators might intentionally try to stir the pot and cause some trouble in order to get additional clicks and shares. Gilbert Arenas was known as an outspoken person during his playing days, and his reputation for having a big mouth only increased now that he has his online talk show. In a recent episode of the Gil's Arena program, Arenas compared 18-year-old Juju Watkins favorably to Caitlin while talking to fellow analyst Shannon Sharp.
If Juju was allowed to come out in the draft, Fever they will regret that they took Caitlin Clark number 1. Caitlin is great. He's not Juju. If they match up in a tournament, 1,000% Juju is going to pick her up full court.
Does Gilbert really believes Indiana Fever will regret taking arguably the best college player ever with the number 1 pick, or is he just fishing for controversy? It can be hard to say, especially given his track record. On the surface, he gave Clark his respects, but then he put her in a hypothetical situation that won't happen in real life. We could argue that it's the job of a talk show host to touch on hypotheticals and provoke reactions, but Agent Zero might have missed the point when it comes to Caitlin Clark. He is certainly not the only basketball lifer to demonstrate a stunning lack of tact while commenting about Caitlin Clark. people with much more clout in women's basketball have volunteered equally puzzling opinions that sell Clark short. Veteran coach of the college women's basketball powerhouse UConn Gino Orma, winner of unbelievable 11 national championships, also has some views that deviate from the predominant media narrative about Caitlin Clark. Perhaps it would be too much to call him a hater, but the following quote certainly positions him as a doubter regarding Clark's potential for dominance in WNBA competition.
She's just not built for the physicality of this league. And she's not quick enough to get away from the physicality. So there's a lot of learning curve, like Diana said. And when she gets it, she has elite skills that are going to really help her. She needs to be on a better team, and she needs to be more experienced.
The argument about the lack of physical strength isn't new, but calling Clark too slow is really unexpected, even coming from a deep basketball mind with proven expertise. Also, his poor appraisal of her teammates on the Fever seems excessive, especially considering the presence of the 2023 top draft pick, Aaliyah Boston, on the squad. While in this case, racial identity doesn't play a role, both Orma and Clark are white. The master strategist of the women's game was likely motivated by factors other than basketball when he said that. It's impossible to ignore that the most hurtful comments about Clark are usually personal in nature. The thesis that Clark is only popular because of the color of her skin and her traditional Middle America background has been repeated in many places and left a permanent trace in the media discourse. One person has shouldered most of the blame for the prevalence of such a view, and that is none else than Jemele Hill, former ESPN host who is always on the front lines of racial struggle, for better or for worse. We would all be very naive if we didn't say race and her sexuality played a role in her popularity. While so many people are happy for Caitlin's success, including the players, this has had such an enormous impact on the game, there is a part of it that is a little problematic because of what it says about the worth and the marketability of the players who are already there. Hill was quoted in a Los Angeles Times article that also features a few other experts who gave their 2 cents and tried to contextualize Clark's viral fame that just keeps growing. The intention may not have been bad, as the article seeks to identify the factors that contributed to her meteoric rise and evaluate the state of affairs in women's basketball. However, most Clark's fans were insulted by the insinuation that she is undeserving of her status and that she was singled out solely due to her race and sexual orientation. Thus, Jemele Hill was accused of race baiting and earned the reputation of being the #1 Caitlin hater on the web right now. This may be too harsh of a sentence, but Hill has no one but herself to blame for putting a foot in her mouth. As evidenced by all the disparaging quotes, Caitlin Clark remains a lightning rod for controversy and a Rorschach test for the attitudes of anyone who uses her name. She has been dragged into all kinds of discussions, ranging from comparisons of best players in the league to wider social issues such as the culture war between liberals and conservatives. To her credit, Caitlin skillfully avoids adding fuel to the fire and is routinely praising the individuals who previously criticized her. She knows full well that it's impossible to make everyone happy and focuses all of her energy on putting the ball into the hoop. That's a wise decision, since no amount of talk will shut down the critics better than consistent excellence on the basketball floor. Clark is mature beyond her years, and the way she responds to critical comments shows that she is handling the spotlight as well as anyone could have expected.